We make an extraordinary number of plans. Plans for tomorrow, plans for next week, plans for our careers, our relationships, our children, our retirement, and sometimes even our weekends. And then life does something rather inconvenient. It ignores them. The flight is cancelled. The job doesn't happen. Somebody changes their mind. The relationship ends. The test result isn't what we hoped for. The weather changes. The car refuses to start. And suddenly, the life we were expecting isn't the life that's happening. Now, obviously, some of these things matter enormously. Others don't. A delayed flight is not the same as losing somebody we love. A broken washing machine is not a tragedy. Although there are moments when it can make a surprisingly convincing attempt. But beneath all of these experiences, there is something interesting going on. Something happened, and almost immediately the mind compares what happened with what it expected to happen. This wasn't supposed to happen. And I think those 5 words are responsible for rather more suffering than we realize, because there is the event, and then there is our relationship with the event. The event may be painful, difficult, frightening, deeply disappointing, but then the mind arrives with the life that should have happened instead. If only I'd done this. If only they hadn't done that. This shouldn't be happening. By now I should have, they should have, life should have. And suddenly we're living in 2 places. There is the life that is actually happening, and there is the life we think should be happening. And unfortunately, only one of them exists. Pain belongs to life. Loss belongs to life. Disappointment belongs to life. Fear belongs to life. I don't think freedom means somehow becoming immune to any of them. But suffering can grow when the mind begins fighting reality with an alternative version of reality. The relationship should have lasted. The opportunity should have worked out. My body should still be able to do what it once did. That person should still be here. Those thoughts are profoundly human. But reality doesn't negotiate. What happened, happened. And the mind can spend an extraordinary amount of time arguing with something. I think we've all done this. Something goes wrong, and for the next hour or day, or sometimes much longer, we conduct an internal appeal. We present new evidence, call imaginary witnesses, deliver an extremely persuasive closing argument, and reality, rather rudely, refuses to reconsider its decision. Perhaps that's because reality isn't actually the thing we're arguing with. We're arguing with the difference between what happened and what I wanted to happen. And there, once again, it's me. My expectation, my plan, my future, my idea of how this was supposed to unfold. And this doesn't mean plans are wrong. Of course we should plan. Physical intelligence is extraordinarily good at it. We couldn't function without prediction. You probably wouldn't want to get on an aeroplane built by people who had decided to simply remain present and see what happens. Planning matters. Preparation matters. The problem isn't having a plan. Perhaps the problem begins when the plan becomes something reality is required to obey. Because then when life moves differently, we don't simply experience what happened. We experience the collapse of what we thought was going to happen. And sometimes that's the part we're actually grieving. Not only what we've lost, but the future we had already imagined around it. The conversations we thought we would have. The places we thought we would go. The person we thought would become. The life we had kindly and quietly constructed inside the mind. And when that disappears, the loss can be very real, even though much of what disappeared hadn't actually happened. So what does it mean to allow life to be as it is? I don't think it means resignation. It doesn't mean saying nothing matters. And it doesn't mean refusing to change something that can be changed. If the roof is leaking, presence is not an alternative to calling somebody who knows what they're doing. We respond, we repair, we apologize, we leave, we begin again. We do whatever the situation requires. But perhaps we can do those things without first requesting reality to become something other than what it already is. Acceptance doesn't mean I like this. It doesn't mean I wanted this. Sometimes it doesn't even mean I'm okay with this. Perhaps it means something much simpler. This is what is here. And only from here can we actually respond. Because if I'm continually responding to what should have happened, I'm not really responding to what is happening. I'm responding to a story. And sometimes that story becomes so convincing that I barely see the life in front of me. When life doesn't go to plan, we also have a remarkable tendency to make it personal. Why is this happening to me? Why does this always happen to me? What does this say about me? Once again, an event becomes identity. A relationship ends and I become someone who wasn't lovable enough. A business fails and I become a failure. Someone rejects me and I become someone who isn't wanted. But perhaps an event can simply be an event. Painful, consequential, sometimes life-changing, but not necessarily a definition of who we are. And this brings us back to something from the first talk. Less me doesn't mean less feeling. If something matters, let it matter. If you're grieving, grieve. If you're disappointed, be disappointed. If you're frightened, be frightened. There is something deeply human about all of those things. But perhaps the experience doesn't also need the additional burden of becoming who you are. And I think there is a kind of freedom in this, not the freedom to control life. We don't have that. Not the freedom to make everything turn out well. We certainly don't have that. Perhaps the freedom to meet what happens without continually comparing it with what should have happened. To make plans without asking those plans to guarantee our future. To hope without turning hope into an expectation. To love, knowing that love cannot protect us from loss. To build, knowing that things sometimes fall apart, and still to participate completely, because letting go of the demand that life obeys us doesn't mean withdrawing from life. Perhaps it allows us to enter it more fully. We can still have preferences, dreams, ambitions, plans. We can still work enormously hard for something that we want. But somewhere underneath all of that, there can be a little more space for life to be life. Not because everything will work out. Sometimes it won't. Not because nothing painful will happen. It will. But perhaps whatever happens, we don't have to spend the rest of our lives arguing with the fact that it happened. Life will continue surprising us. Plans will change. People will change. We will change. And occasionally, the washing machine will apparently decide that it has fulfilled its purpose on Earth. But perhaps freedom isn't getting life to follow the plan. Perhaps freedom is discovering that when it doesn't, we are still here.